As Michigan's premier film school, MPI has been providing hands-on training for over 2 decades here in our 20,000 square foot studio with sound stages, editing labs, and sound editing suites. We're currently enrolling students for our September 21st start date. This week, our cameras are focused on the heart and soul of our one-year filmmaking program, our experienced faculty, each with a working background in the film business and an incredible passion for sharing what they know with the next generation. Today's special guest is the multi-talented Josh Bowren, MPI's editing instructor. Here's your host, MPI's marketing specialist, Sarah Mahmood.
Hi, Josh. It's great to have you here today. We're actually quite lucky that you are one of, our staff members, and you bring all of this great real-world experience and wisdom to the classroom and are really able to help with providing that hands-on experience. Can you kick things off by telling us a little bit about your background and what classes you're teaching?
Well, I teach the post-production class, which is basically everything after the director yells cut. All the assets come to my department, whether it's picture, sound, VFX, graphics, that all comes to my department, and I teach everything from there on, full circle. And I tell the students, this department could be, a department of 10 people, or it could be just one person. But we really focus on what happens in the post-production process, what we have to do to get the film ready to go to the theater.
And that's a huge responsibility there. Because you're right, you have to tinker with it. You have to get things to where they're ready. And people, when they're viewing, don't always realize all of the steps that go into making that work viewable for them. And so curious to know if there are any highlights that you can share about your own career journeys, and you're welcome to throw in a war story or two if you'd like.
Well, my whole career has been a war story, really. And it's funny, in retrospect, looking back, how naive I was being an editor. When we were editing on film, we were basically using tape and scissors. And the whole time early in my career, I thought, man, if I could just have, a better edit system or a better camera, or, man, if I had, digibeta tape, my product would be so much better. And I was so wrong looking back. It was really about telling a story. And fortunately, I figured that out early in my career and really started focusing on telling a good story. And that's really what we teach in my class. We do a lot of button pushing and how to get the equipment to do what we want it to do. But in the end, the equipment is just pencils and paper. That's all it is. I don't care if you're editing on Windows Movie Maker or DaVinci Resolve or Avid. It's all about telling a good story. And a great example of that, I tell my students, and I get laughed at a little bit, but I tell them there's one film that really got me in the theater. And even when they re-released it in 3D, almost, a decade later, it still got me. I still got choked up over it. And it's the movie Titanic. And it's when Jack dies at the end of the movie. And the scene was just so well crafted together. And if you watch just that scene separately, it doesn't really work. You're not really emotionally involved unless you've spent the 3 hours leading up to it, because of all these things that are kind of foreshadowed throughout the film. But it's when they're in the water and they realize that only Rose probably is the only one that fits on the floating door, and Jack decides to stay in the water, and they, engage in some, real heart-to-heart conversation about, promise me you'll never let go, and promise me you'll go on to do the things that you want to do. And it's a real big character arc in the story with Rose's character. And then we kind of go into this little montage where, it becomes kind of a dreamlight stake, and Rose is starting to sing Come Josephine, and we're doing these kind of lap dissolves and just showing passage of time in the water. And then there's a boat off in the distance, and Rose sees the boat and starts to wake up Jack. And the music kind of changes there and goes to these real low tones. And then Rose realizes Jack has died and is not going to wake up. And the edit that I'm specifically talking about that they put in, I've read the script. I have the whole script right here. It's scene 234, and it's nowhere in the script. The edit that actually got a tear in my eye, and it's a music cue. And it's when Rose is looking at Jack, and realizes, oh man, he's not coming back, and they hit that music cue, and it gets me every single time. And I even watched it just recently, yesterday, and it got me again. And that's really just a true testimony to the power of editing. The music cue is actually the same music that's in the beginning of the movie when they're doing kind of the old nostalgic shots of the Titanic. So your brain remembers that. And in editing, it's what we call a donut, where you're bringing it full circle for the audience. And they cue that music, and she kind of lays her head down on the door, and realizes this is it. This whole journey that she's, this short journey that she spent with this guy is over. And then they cut to a cutaway of the boat going away and leaving. And, the audience kind of has to, yell at her and say, okay, tell the boat you're here and blow your whistle. And it is just such a well-crafted scene. And it just really shows how editing, I've been told that editing is probably one of the few art forms that mimics the human brain.
I think that's a fantastic example, and you're right. Editing is kind of that backbone and bringing the sequencing of the story to life and creating memorable experiences. So thank you for that. And speaking of memorable experiences, you do a lot to create that for students at MPI and to make their film journey a memorable one. Can you tell us more about some advantages, in your opinion, about attending MPI?
The thing I really like about my class is going through that process of, when I first started in editing and first started teaching editing for the film school, we were one of the first schools really to teach Avid, and I was one of a few people in Southeast Michigan that knew how to edit on Avid. Now, Avid was an edit system that was digital, so everything was basically ingested onto hard drives, whether it came from film or digital media. Now you had the ability to do the fancy dissolves and everything. And it was that moment where I'm like, okay, I have all the best stuff available to me. Why are my stories not looking any better? Because when I was editing on, 3/4 inch tape, I thought that was the problem, and it wasn't. I had to really learn how to tell a good story. And early in our curriculum at MPI, we really started to change it so that no matter what field you went into, whether you were a director, a screenwriter, an audio engineer, a cinematographer, or even just a grip on set, a custom or a costume designer, a production designer, I really started to design my curriculum so that every student that comes to the post-production class takes something away from it. Because I tell everybody, this is really all hands on deck situation.
I'm so glad that they have you in class and you're there to, again, point them the right direction and give them those different perspectives to think on. Do you have any advice for students and graduates on, how to make it out there in the real world?
The best advice I have is you can't go to the gym and get muscles your first day at the gym. I've tried it. It doesn't work. The advice is to just do it. At all costs, whatever your career is. If it's editing, then edit, and don't be afraid to edit for free. I talk in my class how to protect yourself and how to draw lines in the sand of how much you'll work for free and what you'll do for free. But the bottom line is to get out there and just do it. Whether it's I remember I was up north one year and my dog and my mother's dog were in the backyard and they were fighting. They were play fighting. And I ripped out my phone and videotaped it. And nobody's ever really seen the footage, but I cut the scene together like this little Fight Club montage with some, Imagine Dragon music. And I sped some shots up and slowed some shots down. And nobody ever saw that. It's just something on one of my hard drives that nobody will ever see. But it was just me really taking my own advice and just doing it, just getting out there and doing it. Anybody that's successful in this industry will go back and tell you, A, I didn't know it was going to happen that way, and B, the plan I had didn't work. And it's really in this industry not about your resume or your accolades. It's about, wow, this person has done all this stuff. They really know from kind of from being in the trenches, they've gone out and done it, and they've tried different edits and they've tried different things. Those are the people that really get hired, the people that, that and that, people Well, I met this kid Josh, and he edited some dogs in the cabin of his parents' backyard, and it looked really good. And so that's my best advice, is just get out there and do it. You're certainly not going to be successful just coming to class and learning osmosisly and then going off and getting a job. It just doesn't work that way. Sadly, I say, you're more likely to be struck by lightning going to class than being hired by a resume reel that you sent to some company somewhere. So by just doing it, by calling up productions and saying, hey, I know you have an editor, but would you mind giving me some of your footage and let me just throw some things together? Or if you're a set designer, hey, can I just show up and kind of mop your set when you guys are done for free? And it is really who you know and who you've met. And then on top of that, the last caveat is just to have a good positive attitude. Editing is, in its basic form, it's actually very easy to do. Editing is not hard at all. It's your attitude. I try to make my directors very comfortable in the edit room. It's frustrating when changes to the edit decision list come in and, you're tired and exhausted and they want to make, 15 more changes a week before the premiere. And I kind of just smile and just do it, and they remember that. And in the end, it's really those guys that they're going to hire back, the people that make their jobs easier. I could have an attitude and say, well, you've already been through 15 changes, I'm done. You were going to have to lock the print. Well, then you've kind of made the decision to let them know that, you're not really compatible with them again in the future. So good positive attitude, suck it up, go home and, punch a bag at home or something. And, but don't take it out on your clients. And most importantly, just get out there and do whatever it is that you want to do. You don't really just learn osmosisly and then get thrown in the real world and get a job. It just does not work that way.
That's some pretty solid advice. You're right. Having the right attitude mixed with practicing, and also, making connections and not being afraid to work for free, but having boundaries so you don't get taken advantage of. All of that, I think, is great for our viewers and listeners today. So thank you for joining us and sharing what you know.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Enrollment for the fall is now underway for both our full-year production program and our exciting new MPI Actors Studio workshops, the Motion Picture Institute, now online and on-set and accredited. Thanks for tuning in, and we're going to wrap it up by joining some MPI students hard at work on our fabulous soundstage.
Oh, forgot the lens cap. There we go.
Hey, wait up!
I am working. Okay, guys, roll sound, please. Here we go. Pictures up. Rolling.
Scene 1, take 7, marker.
And action! I wasn't sure how to turn my creativity into a career until I started film school. My name is Sydney, and for 4 years in college, I really didn't know what to do until I found MPI. Now, I'm making my own movies, and I wouldn't trade the on-set experience for anything else in the world. MPI has been launching film careers for over 20 years. Are you ready to start yours?